Hey, this is Jim with SportStream.us here with another SportStream Spotlight. This time being joined by the 1210 Production Company with Brad from 1210 Production Company. Hey, Brad, how are you?
Good afternoon. Doing great.
I am glad to hear it. I am glad you had the opportunity to join us. We've had a couple of days here already with SportStream, and we're really excited about talking to some of our system integrators like yourself and some of the interesting case studies and sports production and technology that you guys are working on. Brad, can you tell us a little bit about the 1210 Production Company and introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Absolutely. 1210 Production Company was started in 2013 with the focus of high schools, small colleges, and minor league teams and enhancing their video production needs, whether it's for their LED screens, whether it's for web stream or social media. We're finding it to really be a whiteboard of creativity and interest with the evolution of technology, and not one project is going to be the same as the other. So we always view this as a blank slate of designing a control room to meet the needs of the end user, whether it is for an LED screen, where you're seeing more people do YouTube or Facebook Live to get their fans to watch it, whether it's for an away game or just trying to enhance for alumni to watch it. So really, our industry has evolved a lot within those 10 years, just to see new technology, better technology, and how creative people can get the ability to show their creativity to people watching at home.
And Brad, I know we're going to talk about a couple of different case studies today from all around the U.S. Where are you guys centrally located?
We are based in New Jersey,
Okay.
about a half hour to the east of Philadelphia, but we do very little in New Jersey, to be quite honest. We spend a lot of time in Texas doing high school football. We'll be in California next week. We're in Cleveland at the end of the week. We do a lot of spring training down in Florida for baseball teams. So anywhere within the United States, we're willing to go and help evolve the video industry.
That's great. So you guys are really serving the entire U.S. all across the country.
That's correct. All across the United States, we have done a little bit international, but
Okay.
mainly in the United States.
That's great. And you know, one of the things you mentioned in your introduction is a recurring theme that we've heard over and over again on SportStream, and that's the ability to do these productions and the broadcast to not only serve the broadcast audience, but the in-venue audience and social media, and how all of these different goals are kind of driving the content and the production projects themselves, right?
I think having a clear vision as to what the venue wants to achieve ultimately is the first question that we ask. Because if you're going to produce an event for a web broadcast, that's going to look much different than if you're doing it for an LED screen in a venue. We'll talk a little bit later about Thorn Stadium in Aldine, Texas, and their video board is basically a 9 by 32 screen, and it's double a 16 by 9 ratio. And just the challenges of making content that wide looks very different than creating content that's going to go on a TV. So they basically, we hope that the clients can tell us what their goals are for the equipment, and then we can help them select the proper equipment and train them on how to use it to make it meet their needs and then exceed their expectations as to how strong of a broadcast they can have.
Absolutely, and you know, it's a perfect segue to the first question I wanted to ask you, and that is, what are some of the common goals that your customers are coming to you with? I know we talked about the web streaming, the social media. We talked about engagement in the venues. I imagine you're hearing all of this, right?
The the one that we hear the most is how do we increase our revenue?
Okay.
And most of the broadcast revenue on our clients is going to be driven by an LED screen. It's playing the commercials, doing the fan cam, doing the dance cam, everybody in the industry will say, "Oh, we're doing the show or the game presentation aspect of it," and that can come with a very specific plan to get the people to smile and look at the LED screen.
Absolutely.
Once we achieve that, then it becomes okay, are we trying to expand that horizon to a greater audience outside of just the stadium? As we do more colleges and more high schools, you see where there's more of a dependency on being able to stream, whether that's going to ESPN Plus, or whether that's going to a high school website or a YouTube channel. Now you're trying to tie in that feed to have all the alumni be able to look at it. And then kind of down the list is how do we market our video and get it distributed? And for a lot of teams using a 3 play as an example with VizRT, they are able to send their highlights to the local TV station at the end of the game. And now the TV station doesn't have to send a reporter out. The team can supply all of their own highlights, and now they're getting a nightly news segment on during baseball season. So I think once we know what needs to be accomplished, it gets easy on us to find the equipment that can do it.
Absolutely. And I think that impression must come from your work and your experience in dealing with a lot of schools too, where I've personally found that monetization is a big part of the conversation when they talk about sports production in schools. Because in a lot of these school districts, the booster program, the athletics program, that's a large revenue source for some of these programs out there, right?
It is, and really finding the money for the upfront purchase is sometimes the hardest aspect of it.
Right.
And sometimes you are dealing with the quarterback club. Sometimes you're dealing with the state grant. And in a lot of circumstances, teams may get one opportunity and they know that they're going to get a lump sum of money that they get to spend. And once they spend it this year, they're not going to be able to ask for another dime for another 10 to 15 years. So we need to get it right, and we need to get it right this time because there may there may be a decade before they are able to try to redesign or change something along the way.
Absolutely. And I think that would be a big reason to work with someone like 1210 Production Company, where the school can rely on some of your past experiences, your knowledge, and your certifications for the products that you offer to kind of help steer them in the right direction and set up the projects that are going to meet their current goals, as well as prepare them for the future goals as the program itself grows as well, right?
My goal is always to build the backbone so that if they do want to change something a year or two down the line, that they don't have to take everything that we installed for them one year, put it in the closet because now, okay, we went from having 3 cameras and instant replay to now we want to have 6 cameras and instant replay. So if you have a video switcher that only has 5 inputs, okay, now we need something that does 10.
Right.
What do we do with the thing that only does 5? So now they've spent that money and it collects dust. So my theory always is to leave room for expansion because maybe the next great idea that comes to you 6 months from now is something that can really impact how that production functions.
Absolutely.
And you want to be able to be set to expand in the future that you don't have to continue to redesign the wheel.
No, absolutely. And while we're talking about designing that wheel, let's talk about some of the specific stuff that you have been involved with. The one that you mentioned in your introduction just a moment ago was the WW Thorn Stadium. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yes, we just recently finished the installation. Thorn Stadium is on the western side of Houston, and their entire school district runs a student-based crew, and they targeted the educational aspect of this. So their equipment was selected largely to match the criteria that the state of Texas has to teach their high school students video production. And you can see in the picture that these are broadcast level cameras. The cameras have 40x lenses on. It's a professional ready to go to broadcast system. Once these students go through the class, they're going to have the ability to be a freelancer on any broadcast crew that they want because they're going to understand how to set up a camera. They're going to understand how to run a switcher. They're going to understand what goes into a TV broadcast. And this is our most extensive room that we've done. It has 4 studio cameras, 2 robotic cameras, a wireless camera, a 16 input switcher, and 4 channels of instant replay, and the ability to play an ESPN package through the graphics channel or a CBS Sports Network package. It really is a lot of power for a high school level.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that we talked about this case study because one of the things that you pointed out is in designing this production system, you took into account that educational aspect of the students actually using the same equipment that's being used in the broadcast industry. You know, it's one thing to build these systems where, oh, this is what you want to deliver. That's great. But in this situation, part of the goal was to give the students something that would become a usable skill for them in the future as well, right?
It can be very intimidating to start when you don't have any experience going into how to run a camera or try to learn the terms of the camera. One of the advantages that Aldine has is that they have had the same director of video for their football games for over a decade. A lot of times, these video positions, it's a revolving door, A, because of how much work it is to go into it, but at the same time, high school football games in Aldine are played Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, so it's a lot of extra time to it.
Right.
And having the staff have the ability to teach and educate the students in a way that they know that they're going to get the knowledge to get them a job, I think helps keep the motivation of the students to learn that. And
Absolutely.
I myself came from a high school of 83 people, and we didn't have any of this. And I just kind of watching our staff do the training during the first couple of scrimmages and the I think smiles and amazement on the kids to realize, okay, now we know how to do this. I think they're really excited about it, and I think they will really hit the ground running once they get a couple games under their belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you talk about the tenure and the experience of the director of the program, when you talk about student resources, you're talking about students that are going to make their way through the school in 4 years on average. So there's going to
Then you're
be
going
a
to bring
constant
another group of
rotation.
kids in,
Yep.
and another group of kids in, and another group of kids in,
Yep.
and I think kind of in the middle picture there, you can see the VisRT TC1. I think a lot of high schools try to mirror the equipment that their classroom teaches. So, as VisRT has a large portion of the market share within the high school classroom, you're
Right.
seeing a lot of athletic programs ask for that equipment to eliminate the learning curve because the teachers and the students learn it in the classroom and they can take that into the extracurricular activities and be able to do it for a football game.
Absolutely. And I'm sure the wealth of resources available from VisIT directly, like the Viz University and some of their tutorial videos that are available online, all kind of help add to the program, especially for the students who do want to take it a little bit further and go home and teach themselves how to get to that next level and kind of stand out in the production space of the class as well.
Absolutely.
And Brad, the next one I wanted to talk about was the Boardwalk Hall at the mat tournament. Can you tell us about this project?
Yes. So where at Aldine, it is completely run by their staff and their students. Every event that they have will be tailored to an Aldine program. The MAC tournament at Boardwalk Hall is more of a touring venue. So they don't have as many events that are required to have their staff run the equipment. For a lot of their concerts, the musical act will bring in the entire crew and bring in the LED screens and the video walls, and we really just accept one feed from them and it'll go out onto the LED screen.
Okay.
The difference in that style of concert to what the Mac tournament utilizes is that the Mac tournament is being produced by the crew of Boardwalk Hall. So it's we selected the equipment to be a lot of Blackmagic design and VizRT gear with the ability to basically have a lower knowledge base of technology that you would look to in a full broadcast room to be more universal so that the crew keeps coming in revolving door as well, but it's a little bit easier to understand how to run a camera that is designed for more of a plug and play as opposed to a broadcast level system.
Okay. So really, the goal on this one is to be able to get that up and going quickly with whatever resources happen to be available on that day.
That's right, because if they have a variety of crew rolling through, they may only produce an event in their control room once every 3 or 4 months.
Right.
We've talked about that they do a uh, race car event in their arena that they have once a year in February and March, and that their entire arena becomes a racetrack, and now they have to drop a wireless camera into the middle of the arena because you can't have race cars driving around all your cables, right? So that was one of the challenges of their arena is how do we get the cabling inside the racetrack without connecting it in, right? 364 days, you don't have to worry about that. But when they turn it into a racetrack, okay, now we're set for that type of a scenario. So the touring arena industry, I think, has kind of evolved from the standpoint that it's okay to be ready for a production crew to come in and handle everything themselves, and
Yeah.
then they simply give us their program feed, and we can get it onto the screen.
And Brad, one of the things you mentioned there, which I think is amazing, that has come up all week long, is we always take into account what it takes to broadcast a football game, a soccer game, a baseball game, because those are the sports that are common to a viewer on TV. When you start talking about racing events, fights, UFC fights in the octagon, or a boxing fight, or in a ring, or a racing event, they all pose unique and different challenges along the way. So your solution that does work 364 days of the year, it only takes that one day and that investment to change those needs and to kind of call time out and say, hey, what's the right equipment for that day? And how do we make it work for the rest of the days as well, right?
And one of the main factors that comes into our design that we get asked a lot about is how do we process real-time data? Whether it's going to be a clock for the UFC that you had talked about, whether it's going to be how many jumping jacks you can do in a certain amount of time. Gymnastics has their own scoring platform. And kind of finding the way to parse that data really becomes the backbone of how you can expand to do those great pieces of content. And you kind of have to scratch your head sometimes when you hear some of the types of events that people want to do because they're not on our normal purview of information or the way that we think. But we've done rodeos, we've done swim meets, we've done roller derby. Um, a
Yeah,
lot of people have a lot of different interests,
sure.
and the nice thing about video is that they can all be highlighted in a way that um, publicizes them in a very good light.
And back to the goal that you talked about on the introduction to the show, monetize them. It is some of those more unique sports and smaller sports where the monetization becomes even a greater priority because the traditional channels to fund those sports aren't there. So it all comes back to that as being one of those goals that will help drive some of these decisions along the way.
It isn't, but sometimes they are the avenues that have the most money because somebody who has had success in an industry and wants to continue to grow that sport.
Right.
I think the Olympic sports are seeing a lot more coverage now with ESPN Plus and college athletic conferences, digital networks, and I think the challenge is to not show bias to some of those sports. Is that everybody's used to watching the SEC network and NFL on Fox, and you're very biased on football and the NFL and college football, and then you kind of trickle down and realize there are a lot of other sports out there that need to be covered the same way, and that's how all of these conference networks started. Was they needed airtime and they needed to be able to show all of the sports.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to emphasize is that when we talk sports production, it really is some of these constant standards that you'll come across along the way, like you talked about integrating the data, whether it's a sports scoreboard feed or judges scoring. There's always going to be that aspect in any kind of competition that you're going to want to communicate to the audience. Brad, the other project I wanted to ask you about was the Savannah Ghost Pirates. Can you tell us a little bit more about this one?
I really enjoyed working with the Ghost Pirates and the staff at End Market Arena. It was really our first introduction into a broadcast level control room. And when I say broadcast level, you're looking at a 2/3 chip lens camera. You're looking at a CCU. You're looking at the quality of equipment that you expect to see watching a game on TV. And it was all new construction. It was right in the heart of COVID. And anytime you have new construction, it always lends an extra wrinkle into the venue. And their staff really embraced it. And they said, we want to hit the ground running here. And they were able to pull some people from NHL franchises and kind of raise that bar, even though that they're only a minor league team. They approach it with a NHL fan experience, and you put the infrastructure in for hockey. I had a phone call with them earlier today. They're getting ready to do Monster Jam. They'll do Globetrotters. I was on their website earlier today, and they just hosted a political rally with Vice President Harris last weekend, and it looks like it was their most highly attended event, to my knowledge, that they've had. I mean, standing room only. So you build the infrastructure, and once you have that, then it really helps set your venue aside.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the goals with this one is not only the broadcast from the venue itself, but also that in venue experience all kind of being pulled together from that production gear, right?
I think the in-venue experience is really the primary focus that most people come to us looking to enhance, because I worked as an end user for over a decade, and I always went to the sales staff and I said, listen, you get them in here the first time, and I'll get them here the second time, because there are a lot of venues across the country that don't have a major franchise within walking distance, or within a very easily attainable way to do that. And if you can show a 5-year-old on the screen eating ice cream, that kid is going to talk about that experience for the next 2 weeks to grandmom, to his cousins, to his aunts and uncles. Everybody's going to hear about how great of a time he had at the Ghost Pirates. And now that gives them something to want to come back to. So I think you first get the sponsorship dollars based on people playing the ads, but then you also can see the increased revenue of people just enjoying to come to the stadium or the ballpark or the hockey arena to enhance that experience.
That's awesome. Brad, thank you so much for sharing these case studies with us. One of the questions that I do like asking all of our guests is what kind of trends, products, technologies, what are you seeing happening in the sports production world now as one of those just ongoing things that more and more people are talking about and asking about?
I think you're seeing a lot of streaming
Okay.
requirements and the interest to expand the equipment outside of just the LED screen and the fan experience within the stadium. And I think the level of that production is quickly escalating to wanting to get to almost an ESPN level type of production or look at it graphically to have at home. Now, it used to be okay, maybe we would have 5 to 10 people watching a web stream, and our goal was always to, if they want to watch the team play, we want them in the stadium. Now you're seeing more where it's more common to have a fan base only go to a digital platform. How many baseball games a year are only on Apple TV now? Or how many NFL games are going to be on Amazon? Or how many games are going to be on Peacock? The industry has changed with what streams are expecting. In very early on, it was okay if it was just a score bug that updated the data in real time. And now it's okay. We want to bring out all the lower thirds. We want to have go to break graphics. We want to have nat mics. We want to have announcers dedicated to that web stream. So the bar is quickly being raised and also constantly being raised.
Absolutely, and I think the audience is being raised. We're seeing it ourselves where a lot of people are growing up as a fan going to a specific stadium in their local hometown. They move away, life takes them in another direction. They want to continue to stay up and give them that taste of the hometown energy, you know? In the case you talked about with the different school districts, I know if a student went to Aldine High School and they were part of that production team for 4 years, when they go on to college, they're going to want to keep tabs on what is being done in that venue, what is being done on the production. And part of having that stream available, it just allows you to grow your audience, not only from one game to the next game, but over time and over time of the program as well, right?
Yes, it does. And I think because of that, it used to be very centrally located and regional. If you want to watch a Phillies game, you have to have Comcast within the Philly market. Right
Right.
now, you can stream every game on MLB TV or NHL.com, and the information is there. And I think people have stronger connections to the high schools, to the colleges, to realize that even though they are no longer on campus, they can still feel that connection and the passion that they had while they attended it. And now they can see where the program has grown.
Absolutely. Brad, thank you so much for joining us here for the Sports Stream Spotlight. Anyone who's interested in learning more, you can go to 1210productioncompany.com. You can reach out to Brad and his team either by email or by the phone number listed here on the screen. Check out 1210productioncompany.com to learn more about these different case studies that we talked about today or about your next project coming up in sports broadcasting. Brad, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.